Joining us now, I've retitled him, and I'm sure my friends at the Heritage Foundation will say that's not his title, but he's the chief gumshoe for the Heritage Foundation, head investigator. He's just got a book coming out called The Myth of Voter Suppression. And I love this because in Virginia, every time somebody says the words vote and ID, they don't even have to be next to each other. Somewhere there's a Democrat who will just sit bolt upright and go, vote suppression, poll tax, and all these things that, that are epithets that are meant to just dissuade people from even having a conversation about making sure every valid voter casts one valid vote. He is Fred Lucas. Fred, thank you for joining us. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me on. I'm great.
Am I overstating the left's fascination with calling out this imagined vote suppression? And really, it's not that it didn't happen in the past.
Yeah, I mean, the book just points that out. Horrible, horrible thing occurred in the past. There was a real Jim Crow. What's happening now is not Jim Crow 2.0, but you do have to acknowledge the horrible aspects of Jim Crow in the past. That's what makes it so reprehensible, I think, that you have people on the left who try to say Jim Crow 2.0 and compare voter ID or making sure dead people aren't on the voter rolls to like real life voter suppression and real life poll taxes and so forth.
I will be the one in the room that points out that the fellow who was voting, talking about Jim Crow 2.0 ought to know because he spoke at the funeral of an actual Klan Grand Wizard. So, if anyone knows what Jim Crow looks like, it's President Biden. I bring that up to point out that there was a political party that leaned on these vote suppression tactics. And it was the Democrats, the Dixiecrats, as we like to call them.
Well, that's a big point in the book, that the Democrats were not only the party of Jim Crow, Democrats were also the party of Tammany Hall. That was on the northern side. That was the and various other like mini Tammany Halls, was the machine, basically corrupted elections. Tammany Hall and Jim Crow both had the same goal ultimately, which was to warp election laws in order to gain Democratic victories. You're seeing the same thing nowadays. Democrats, Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden tried to push this bill through Congress, H.R. 1, supposedly For the People Act. This book, The Myth of Voter Suppression, really dissects that. It dives into this executive order that Biden pushed through that is, in lieu of getting that federal election takeover through, they're trying an administrative state takeover of elections throughout the country. Part of that is weaponizing the DOJ against various states and voter ID laws.
Well, we have to watch the DOJ because I believe it was an attorney general who left the attorney general's office to go start this voter, Zuckerbuck spending vote, get out the vote group. And we were talking about, some of the things that have happened. And I want to make sure it's clear. We talk frequently about vote dilution here, Fred, which is, this amorphous kind of 45-day window like we have in Virginia where who knows and where they come from, and people are just, they're just bringing baskets of votes from their neighborhood. And you've got, just adjudicated cases of senior center, senior care facility coordinators who are being paid by political parties to get their members voting rights and then vote for their residents. So there's lots of vote dilution going on. It's not the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And in one sense, the very real problem of voter fraud is a form of suppression because you're canceling out legitimate votes. And that's a major point of the book, The Myth of Voter Suppression, which is that there are multiple documented cases of voter fraud. Now, are there people out there who exaggerate that? Absolutely. But the fact is, when you compare voter fraud to voter suppression, there have been people who have gone to jail for voter fraud. There have been people who have elections that were overturned because of voter fraud. That with voter suppression, you can't find the plaintiff. There are various things that Stacey Abrams and other people have brought up about disparate impact studies show such and such law will disproportionately affect one group more than the other, but they have not proven that an eligible voter that can legally vote was turned away and prevented from voting.
I've been asking that for years now, Fred, is show me that just one, because I have adjudicated cases of people who weren't supposed to vote that did. We have a kid who went to prison because one of his professors at James Madison University, of all the ironic places, was registering and voting for deceased people. And the only way they caught him is the registrar was friends with one of the decedents and had been at their funeral. So when she saw the name on the vote, she said, hold it, how could this person have voted? And this is the kind of thing that they suborn while yelling vote suppression. It's almost like the person who yells fire in the crowded theater, but the intent is to get the place empty so they can rob the cash till.
Yeah, it is something like that. I mean, it's these various, every time a law comes up, and the book gets into documenting the lies, pretty much takes apart each of the lies told about the various state election reforms that were supposedly called Jim Crow 2.0, so many aspects of what the lie that was told and what the truth is, and it gets into the actual facts about voter fraud, about voter rolls with dead people on it, about ballot harvesting. And
it is true, and I've heard enough of that. I'm not in Georgia, but I've seen the numbers. There was more people cast votes after, quote, Jim Crow 2.0 than ever before, and there isn't a single person that's said there was a survey done that said, was it easier or harder to vote? And everyone, especially in the black community, said it was easier.
Yes, there was actually an MIT and University of Georgia study, a joint study that came out that found 99% of people found the election to be very easy to vote. The average wait time was something like 2 minutes because Georgia, under the so-called horrible election law, they expanded early voting. So it was it was almost a hoax. I mean, in fact, what you could call it. So.
We're visiting with Fred Lucas, chief investigator for the Heritage Foundation. He's got a book called The Myth of Voter Suppression. I want to talk about one other thing though in this, and that is the things that they're doing to convince us, gaslight us into thinking that we need to completely change how we vote. Start with ranked choice voting. We have a Democrat member of the Virginia House of Delegates that started her own political action committee specifically dedicated to get ranked choice voting installed as the voting way of record in Virginia. And if a Republican started a political action committee to say, defend life, there would be holy hell to pay about that. But ranked choice voting, 45 days of open elections, vote harvesting, and drop boxes. Talk about those things and their impact on every valid voter casting one valid vote.
Yeah, well, ranked choice voting, I mean, the problem with that is we've seen over and over again situations where the top vote getter does not win the election. And I've written about this, there have been several states, mostly localities that adopted it, had it for a few cycles, and then got rid of it. We're seeing that in Alaska. A lot of people there didn't like it after trying it. I was tried and found wanting, actually. But yeah, ranked
New Yorkers aren't real happy with it.
They were not happy. Eric Adams nearly lost after really almost wiping out the rest of the Democratic field in the Democratic primary last year. But he almost ended up losing because they kept counting the votes differently. So that could have ended up badly. What's really ironic about ranked choice voting is that the same people who gripe and moan about the Electoral College, saying that sometimes the popular vote winner won't get elected, that's what's happening with ranked choice voting.
And for all of us here at the Virginia Institute for Public Policy, virginiainstitute.org, more CPAC highlights coming up next weekend. Until then, so long, and thanks for all the fish.